So, a few months ago, my friends and I decided to try the elevator game. You've probably heard of it. It's one of those creepy urban legends that's been floating around the internet for years. The basic idea is that you enter an elevator alone, press a specific sequence of floors, and if you do everything right, you end up in another dimension. Pretty insane, right? But we were curious, and honestly, we thought it was just some weird internet challenge, nothing more. It was around midnight when we decided to do it. We had to find an old, quiet building, preferably one that wasn't too busy. There's this one old hotel near the outskirts of town, and it was perfect. It had a worn-down, eerie vibe to it that seemed to fit the whole creepy elevator thing. The four of us, me, my best friend Mike, and two others, Jenna and Laura, entered the building, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. We were fully aware that we were doing something really dumb, but the idea of being part of something that's talked about online was too tempting. We stood in front of the elevator, and I could already feel my palms sweating. I don't know if it was the late hour or just the atmosphere of the building, but I felt uneasy. My heart was racing, but I tried to brush it off. We followed the instructions we found online, and I'll admit we were all a little skeptical. The rules were simple. 1. Enter the elevator alone at night. 2. Press the following sequence of floors: 4, 2, 6, 2, 10, 5, 3. Once you reach the 5th floor, a woman is supposed to appear. You have to not look at her, and if she does, press 5 again to return. 4. If you make it to the 10th floor, the game is supposed to transport you to another dimension. The plan was that one of us would try it first, and the rest would be there to watch. I volunteered, stupidly, looking back now, and stepped inside. The elevator had that typical musty smell, and I could hear the creaks of the old machine as it hummed to life. I pressed the first button for floor 4, then 2, then 6, trying to follow the instructions exactly as they said. As the elevator moved, I felt this strange pull in my stomach. It wasn't nausea. It was something else, like the air around me was changing, thickening somehow. I brushed it off as nerves, telling myself I was just being paranoid. When I pressed the button for floor 10, everything stopped. The elevator jolted, and I felt the air turn icy. I tried pressing the button for 5 again, but the elevator didn't move. The lights flickered. That's when I realized something was terribly wrong. I felt a cold sweat running down my back. Then, I heard it. A soft, almost whispery voice, as if it was coming from somewhere deep inside the elevator. "You shouldn't be here." I froze. My heart was pounding in my chest, and my hands were shaking as I reached for the emergency button. I pressed it. Nothing. I looked up at the display, and the floor numbers were glitching, jumping randomly, but none of them showed the right floor. Panic set in. I started pressing every button like a maniac, but the elevator refused to move. Suddenly, the doors opened. I don't know why I did it, but I stepped out. The hallway was dark, but there was a faint light at the end. The air was cold, too cold for a building that should have been heated. I tried calling out to Mike, Jenna, and Laura, but my voice echoed strangely, like the whole space was too vast for just one building. There was no response. I walked down the corridor slowly, hearing only the sound of my own footsteps. That's when I noticed it. The walls. The wallpaper, which had been torn and stained, looked like it was peeling away, revealing something underneath. It wasn't the bare plaster I was expecting. It was something else. I couldn't make it out, but it was like the walls were alive. I started backing up, feeling an overwhelming sense of dread. And then I saw them. Shadows. Figures. Moving across the walls in a way that didn't make sense. They weren't human, but they were shaped like people. Tall, dark, elongated figures. They moved quickly, silently, their shapes barely visible in the dim light. I couldn't see their faces, but I knew they were watching me. I turned to run back to the elevator, but when I got there, the doors weren't there anymore. It was just a blank wall. I pounded my fist against it, screaming for help, but the only sound I heard was my own frantic breath. That's when the shadows started moving toward me. The cold, suffocating air around me thickened as I realized I was not alone in this place. The figures were coming closer, faster now, their long limbs stretching unnaturally, their bodies twisting in ways that no human should be able to. And I realized I had made a terrible mistake. The game was real, but not in the way we thought. It wasn't just a simple jump to another dimension. We had broken the rules, and now we were trapped. I felt the pressure building in my chest like I couldn't breathe. I couldn't see the exit. My heart raced in panic as I felt hands, cold, clammy hands, brush against me. I screamed, but the sound was muffled, like it was being swallowed by the air itself. Then, just as I thought I couldn't take it anymore, the elevator doors suddenly reappeared, as if they were summoned by sheer will. I ran, leaping inside, not daring to look behind me. The doors slammed shut and the elevator started moving again. I didn't care which floor it was going to anymore. I just needed to leave that place. But when the doors finally opened, I wasn't in the hotel anymore. I was back in the lobby. Everything was the same, except for one thing. Mike, Jenna, and Laura were nowhere to be found. The building was silent, too silent. I stepped out, confused, but the front door was locked. I tried to call them, no response. I looked around, desperate, but it was like the building was holding its breath. It wasn't until I heard the soft whisper again that I realized I wasn't alone, and the shadows were still here, watching me. I thought I had escaped, but I hadn't. They were still hunting me, and now they were coming for me too. If you ever find yourself in a place like this, don't play the game. You don't want to know what happens when you lose, because you won't just lose the game, you'll lose yourself.